Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's session. Today we have a panel, and it's titled The Role of Faith-Based Leaders to Reduce Alcohol Use Risk Factors and Increase Protective Factors in Hispanic and Latino Communities. Today's panelists are Dr. Hector Santos and Alfredo Serrato. I'll tell you a little bit more about them pretty soon. Next slide. So for today's webinar, we're offering simultaneous translation. Tenemos traducción simultánea al español. So if you want to listen to this panel in Spanish, you can click the interpretation tab, then click Spanish. Presiona la pestaña de interpretación y luego presionas español. Next slide. As you know, today's event is being recorded. All participants will be muted and cameras will be turned off. Please make sure that your computer speakers are turned on and off to hear today's presentation. If you have any technical issues, please send a message to the Hispanic and Latino Behavioral Health COE on the chat box. If you have any questions for our presenters, we ask that you use the Q&A tab. You may also use the chat box, as we'll be looking at it periodically to be able to answer your questions and share your comments. Type your question and hit send. We can address the questions to our presenters at the appropriate time. Usually after we end the session, we'll leave some time for discussion. Also, we will be sharing the presentation in PDF format through the chat box for those of you who want to keep it. Next slide. So once we complete the webinar, it's very important that you please complete the evaluation. We will provide an evaluation link and also a QR code. We can share it through the chat, and we'll also have a slide at the end with this information. It is very important that you complete the evaluation, as this is what allows us to do this type of event, and we can continue to do the work that we're doing. You will receive a certificate of attendance by email approximately 1 week from today. Next slide. So our mission, the mission of the Hispanic Latino Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, is to advance and support the sustainability of behavioral health by promoting community-driven, culturally grounded, and person-centered prevention, treatment, multiple pathways of recovery, and recovery support for Hispanic and Latino communities. Next slide. So here are our panelists for today. I will tell you a little bit about them and their background, and I will invite them to share some of their experiences and why they are here today. So we'll start with Alfredo Serrato. Alfredo is as a Senior Workforce Development Officer at CHES. He leads national training and system change efforts in behavioral health, helping teams apply proven models in real-world settings, especially in communities facing complex challenges. Also, as Senior Workforce Development Officer at CHES, he leads national training and systems improvement efforts focused on strengthening behavioral health services through practical people-centered strategies. His current work supports organizations across the U.S. in translating proven models into everyday practices, especially, as we mentioned before, for communities facing complex barriers to care. Earlier in his career, he led international initiatives focused on conflict resolution, faith initiatives, and public health, gaining first-hand experience adapting programs across a wide range of settings. I'll present Dr. Santos, and then I'll let them introduce themselves. So Dr. Hector Santos was born in Sidra, Puerto Rico in 1954. His first 10.5 years of schooling he did in Connecticut. The second half of 11th grade and senior year of high school he completed at St. Anthony Abbey in Puerto Rico. He did 4 years of college with a major in social sciences and pre-med as elective courses, then 4 years at the University of Puerto Rico School of Medicine, straight internship in pediatrics, 3 years of military service active duty in Germany, 2 years completing specialty in pediatrics, board certified in this specialty. He was in private practice for 22 years in pediatrics as an attending physician in pediatric intensive care at a teaching hospital. Then he completed a master's degree in addiction counseling at the Universidad Central del Caribe at the School of Medicine here in Bayamón. He's an ordained permanent deacon of Catholic Church Diocese in Caguas, director of the master's degree program in addiction counseling at the Universidad Central del Caribe, professor of addiction neuropsychopharmacology at the UCC, a founder of Renaciendo en Cristo, program for drug and alcohol rehabilitation at Our Lady of Carmen Parish in Sidra. And he's a consultant in addiction medicine to over a dozen organizations and entities, including, of course, IRESA. So let's start with Alfredo. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you do the work that you do in relation to religion and spirituality?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you to the Hispanic and Latino Behavioral Health Center of Excellence for having me. It's great being here and being able to share with you all the things that I've gained over the years in relation to culture, faith, and addiction. My role is with CHESS, the Center for Health. It's a program that's under the University of Wisconsin, and my specific role there is related to a combination of culture and process improvement, and also creating tools that we can use in order to measure the people that we serve. And so that's something that's of incredible interest to me right now. I'm developing an algorithm for that so that we can get more precise as to how to be able to serve. So the model that we use is the NIATEX model, and that is a model that's been around for a long time. It is considered a evidence-based practice by SAMHSA, and so we've been able to use that in a way that helps change particular practices, make them better. At the personal level, I want to share a little bit, give a shout out to where I'm from. I'm originally from Honduras, and I have 9 kids, adopted 3. That's like the love of my life is being a dad, so a lot of what I learned in the field, actually, I also apply with my children. And so I'll try to make that personal for you all in order for you to be able to maybe take some of what we're going to be talking about home with you, so that it can improve whatever it is that you do and how you might live. And so I'm excited. I'm actually very excited to hear Dr. Hector as well, because this is the first time we've met. And so I'm going to hand it to Dr. Hector so he can introduce himself.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. How does this pediatrician get involved in substance use disorders? It's kind of a long story, but when I was in the process of my theological studies to become a deacon, our bishop asked us which part of the social pastoral we wanted to work in. And when I raised my hand, I said I want to work with drug and alcohol addiction. And he asked me why, because I'm a pediatrician. And I said that I had seen in my private practice the destruction that this disease brings upon families. And I had to go to several wakes of some of my patients that died because they were either killed in the street or died of overdosages. And for that reason, I said that I wanted to work in addiction. And he asked me, what did I know about it? And I said, I know absolutely nothing about drug addiction or alcohol abuse. And but I was willing to learn. And then I had a friend that was the director in a psychiatric hospital here in my hometown, and they had what was used to be called detox, which we call now assisted withdrawal. And he let me work there, and I worked there for a year, and I learned the medical part of the disease. And after working with this population for a couple of years, I found out that I knew nothing about addiction, even after working with them for 2 or 3 years. And then at that time, I went to the University Central del Caribe, and I signed up for the master's degree in addiction counseling because the disease would confound me. I just didn't understand it. And thankfully, there I learned about the disease, particularly about the neuropharmacological aspect of it, and I began to understand the disease. And then after a few years of teaching there, they asked me if I could direct the department of addiction counseling, and I did. And we started a program in the medical school at that time called CSWAM, which is Certificate in Substance Abuse Medicine. And then we introduced into our curriculum all aspects of drug abuse, from with our students during their first year of medical school, second year, third year, and when they were in their fourth year of training, we would give updates in drug addiction and treatment of people who had substance use disorders. So we began that CSWAM program, and all of our students from the Universidad Central del Caribe, from our medical school, graduated with a certificate in substance abuse medicine. And that's how I got into this, I guess, what I dedicate myself to completely. And we started in our parish a ministry called Rebirth in Christ. And what we do is we help people in their process. It's an ambulatory program where we have psychologists and myself as an addiction specialist and other resources where we help people and their families in the process of recovery. And it's a family-centered ministry. The person that has a substance use disorder does not attend therapy by himself. It's always a family-based therapeutical model. And we have had much success in people's becoming abstinent and recovering from this disease. And well, that's how I got into this, into this mess, I guess you could say. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful work that you're both doing. Part of the reason that we have both of you today is that you're both versed in addiction medicine, in substance use disorders, as well as participate as faith leaders in your communities. So we know that for Latinos, great respect is given to religious leaders and the scripture they share. Among Latino communities, spirituality and religion is an important value that may influence behavior, including alcohol consumption, which is what we're focusing on today. And furthermore, spirituality has been identified as both a risk and a protective factor for alcohol consumption among Latino communities. So having said that, we'll go to our next slide. That is part of the reason that we decided to hold this panel. So I would like for both of you to share, and we'll start with Dr. Santos. How have you seen culture and cultural values mediate alcohol use in Latino communities?
The use of alcohol in Latino communities, particularly in the Caribbean, because traditionally, sugarcane was grown on all of the islands in the Caribbean basin. So the basic product needed to create alcohol was grown in, I guess you could say, in our backyards. So therefore, the use of alcohol is culturally embedded in our society. And as with other drugs, nowadays with cannabis, the normalization of the consumption of alcohol is part of the Latino society. And we are a very patriarchic society, and the patriarchs teach their children to consume. And at one time, this is diminishing nowadays, but in our society, the consumption of alcohol is part of, specifically in males, part of their masculinity. And if they do not consume alcohol, then that masculinity is questioned. So it's the consumption of alcohol in Latino communities is very, very extensively embedded in our culture, and therefore it is normalized. And it is not seen as a problem, it's seen as part of living. It's seen as something that produces happiness. It's seen as a way of families and communities to join together and to rejoice and it's associated with festivity. And therefore, trying to change that image and trying to educate in regards to the fact that alcohol is a psychotropic drug like any other, well, it requires a lot of teaching and a lot of education to our communities so that they can realize that this is a very dangerous and highly addictive drug.
Thank you. Some of our participants are already agreeing with you. And you mentioned in terms of cultural values, gender roles, and yes, we agree that it is very ingrained into gender role expectations and celebrations. It's very present in all of that, and it requires then a re-education and changing of the values. So, Alfredo, what would you say? How have you seen culture and cultural values mediate alcohol use in Latinos?
Well, I've seen two different cultural shifts happen as I study this. Well, first of all, the use of alcohol was essentially, from a Christian perspective, was instituted by Christ Himself in the Last Supper, and so it was normalized then, but the abuse of it came later, and that was not necessarily a means to be able to say it's okay to get drunk. Actually, biblically, if you look at the Old Testament, there's only one case in the entire Bible where alcohol use to a point of actually getting drunk is permitted. It's in the Old Testament. In the case of severe pain, when you are injured, it was allowed to actually get you drunk so that you can have a sedative. And so today, the practice is, like, Dr. Santos already mentioned, it has been normalized, but there's also been a shift on the evangelical side of saying alcohol is completely bad, and if you use it, you are a bad person. And so, so you have these things. One is being, normalize the practice and accept it. And if people get drunk, well, that happens. The other one is, no, you cannot do that. And if you do it, you cannot be part of us. And so it's a rejection. And so I see that both sides, in a way, are contributing to some of what we're seeing in the Latino community. And in some cases, well, in a lot of cases, both of those particular practices are not necessarily useful for the whole concept of a disease of addiction. People are either accept it and it's okay, or reject it, but there's something in the middle that's missing. And some of what we can learn from leadership being in the church is being able to recognize those things in order to be able to help an individual and have it be more person-centered. There's more going on than whatever it is that they're doing. And so in order to do that, you need to get to the point of knowing the individual. And so that's what I would mention in terms of a cultural shift that I've seen over the years within Christianity as a whole. And I'll get more specific as we go, but that would be my inclination, is that these values have shifted and they're not necessarily good. There's a lot of good that can be extracted from it, but in terms of like alcohol use, it's something to be concerned about.
Right. Thank you.
I'd like to mention something. I'd like to mention something else. Traditionally, excessive use of any substance, including alcohol, was seen as sinful, and the way the church would respond would be in a punitive nature. One thing that we are doing in our dioceses is that we are educating the clergy and people who assist to our church, so that they understand that the excessive use of this drug is a disease, and we don't cure it in a punitive manner. We cure this disease by offering treatment. And that is the justification and the reason that the church has to become involved in rehabilitation, to change that view of the punitive nature of drug or alcohol consumption. And we must educate clergy and all of the members of the church in regards to the fact that this is a disease, and it is a treatable disease. And besides being a disease of an etiology that is biological, psychological, and social, it also has profound spiritual roots also. And as people who provide spiritual guidance, we must be aware of this. And of course, use our spirituality as not necessarily to dissuade people from consuming, but use spirituality as a tool for their recovery, not seeing spirituality in the punitive nature of sinfulness. And we have to educate in regards to this. And this is why we, I'm speaking as myself, as a part of the clergy of our church, this is why we have to get involved in the recovery process of the people who come to us.
Mhm. Thank you. And yes, we've been speaking about culture, alcohol, religion, and how, depending on how it's seen, it can be normalized, and it can also be inconsistent with recovery principles. And that's where the education comes in. And it's important to be educated on the disease to be able to share that with communities. So I appreciate both of you sharing that. In terms of how religion can moderate alcohol consumption, in what ways might religion serve as a moderating factor in alcohol consumption? And we'll start with Alfredo this time.
So So let me start with some definitions so that we can all have like a platform. So the term religion is a practice, is based on whatever it is that you do. And then there's a faith factor, which is another word, faith, which is what you believe. Um, and and so and then you have spirituality, which is more agnostic, right? You know that there is a power there, but sometimes you can't define it. And so, but when you do have a denomination, whether it's, Catholic, evangelical, Orthodox, whatever the case may be, then these terms start coming alive, right? And sometimes the way religion, and I'm going to use those three terms interchangeably, right? Where religion can start moderating the consumption is, I think it needs to start at the level of instruction with either the clergy, the ministers that are in place, and having that education level that Dr. Santos mentioned, in order to start filtering in, but not to the individual. It needs to be filtered in to the family unit, because that's the strength of the Latino and Hispanic community, is family. And so how do you create within a particular church, a ministry that actually reaches out to try to increase awareness of this particular disease? In the thing that I've seen is that in the United States, they tackle it very individualistic. They try to educate the individual. But I think if we want to be able to do something within the Latino communities, we need to take that faith factor, which is strong. About 95% of Latinos believe in God and have some sort of denomination. About 5% don't. And if 95% are believing, I would say that within that 95%, it's not an issue of educating the individual, it's an issue of educating the family, and having those principles being instituted right from the get-go, as a family enters a particular place of worship, that it's part of the culture, and that they may be able to experience it, because we don't necessarily like to be told what to do. We like to experience it, and then once we experience it, we tend to lean into it. And I've seen this in multiple churches where the congregations have programs for addiction, and it's no longer the individual coming. It's maybe the husband and wife, and it's sometimes education for the children, and that seems to work really well for our community.
Dr. Santos.
Can I
Thank
step
you.
in now?
Yes,
Good.
thank you.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And actually, um, our ministry is family based. The person that has the substance use disorder doesn't come by himself; he comes with his family or her family. Something that we emphasize greatly, and this is the cornerstone of our ministry, is what I call spiritual maturity. We try to dissipate in the psyche of our participants that the notion of a mystical and magical God that takes away my consumption of drugs or alcohol with a magic wand. What we emphasize is that what we are to establish is a mature relationship with God as we conceive Him. If it's Christianity, it doesn't matter if it's our Father God or if it's Allah, it doesn't matter. It's God as we conceive Him or her. As we conceive God, and establish a relationship with God, well, then in that relationship is where I find the tools necessary to be able to recover. Not because just because I pray to God and tell him or her, take away my disease. No, that is not mature spirituality. And I do not do what may in what the term is offend God by my consumption of alcohol. I do not offend God. God is inoffensible. What provokes the curing of my disease is the relationship, the mature relationship that I establish with God, a relationship of intimacy and love. If that relationship becomes the fundamental option of my life, then drugs and alcohol do not fit in there because they destroy my relationship with God. God does not have the magic wand to take away my disease. That loving relationship that I established with God, then that is where my cure, where I am able to get rid of my disease, because my consumption of drugs and alcohol damaged that relationship that I treasure, and that is the fundamental option in my life. And therefore, through that mature relationship with God, then will be able to recover from my disease. And that's what I call mature spirituality. Not the spirituality that if I am good, God will grant me entrance to heaven. And if I am bad, then he will send me to hell. That is immature spirituality. Not because there is a heaven that he promises me, nor because a hell that exists, am I not to keep loving and breathing and dedicate my whole life to that relationship, the relationship with God. That is what is going to, through that relationship, is going to cure my disease. And that mature spirituality must always be the center of our intervention.
Great. That's beautiful. And Dr. Santos, so mature spirituality and the relationship that results from that, the relationship with God, you're saying will facilitate this process of recovery.
Definitely, because then drugs and alcohol will interfere with my relationship with God. And if that relationship is the most important aspect of my life, then it just doesn't fit. There's no part of my life, or no part of my life in relationship with God, where drugs or alcohol are going to help in my relationship. And if that relationship is the most important one in my life, then I have the possibility of recovering. I have seen women that have been out on the streets that they get involved in prostitution to be able to, they sell their bodies so that they can get money to consume drugs or alcohol. And some of them have come to me and said, they took my children away. And there's nothing in this world that I love more than my children. But not even that love for my children is enough for me to stop using drugs or alcohol. And some of these people, when they discover the relationship with God, then that relationship is enough for them to recover from drugs and alcohol. And I always say there is no human relationship stronger than my relationship with the Creator. And if I discover that, and if my life revolves around that relationship, then I will be able to stop using drugs and alcohol.
Darius, if I may add, thank you, Dr. Santos, for that. I totally agree. One of the things that, culturally speaking, the Latino and Hispanic community enjoy is the whole concept of collectivism. We do things together. But when it comes to any sort of change within that collectivist mentality, the one thing that, and it's been mentioned in the chat already, relationship, which is the concept of reciprocity, right? If you're in a one-way relationship, things just don't seem right for the Latino Hispanic individual. But when you're in a reciprocal relationship, when you feel God, and you react to God, that relationship is what strengthens the ability for decision making. And it's almost like the whole concept of motivational interviewing. If you all are familiar with MI, which is one of the best skill sets to have, is that you enter into this relationship with your um, with the person that you're engaging with, and it's not a one-way therapeutic environment where you're telling them what to do, giving them advice. It's them telling you, and you are reacting to whatever it is that they are experiencing. And that's the same thing with our relationship with God. Is that in order for something to be of impact, that reciprocity is needed, and that's the strength of the Latino Hispanic community, is that because we are collectivists, reciprocity is in the picture all the time. And so we need to look at the therapeutic model and make sure that reciprocity is part of it.
Thank you, Alfredo. And in terms of the collectivist value in Latino communities, it is well aligned with the family-centered perspective that Dr. Santos was sharing. And family can be redefined and may include your religious community. So that may be your family as well. And that may facilitate some of the recovery processes that we're speaking about. Speaking of facilitation, how would you say it some literature speaks about risk factors, religion and spirituality as risk factors, and some speak to religion and spirituality as protective factors for alcohol consumption. So what would you say about that? And we'll start with Dr. Santos this time.
In Puerto Rico, we have a longitudinal study called Encuesta Juvenil, which has been being done for like over 30 years now. And what we do is we go to all the private and public schools, starting from 7th grade till 12th grade. And one of the things that we study is, well, the most important thing that we study is consumption of drugs, alcohol, cigarettes. Now we have included vaping, etc. And we also study not just the prevalence of use, we also study protective factors. And it's very interesting because year after year after year, that has been invariable. The number one protective factor in regards to consumption of drugs and alcohol is religiousness or spirituality. Those that habitually go to church or some kind of service are very well protected from the consumption of drugs and alcohol. Risk factors. Like I was saying before, if we do not change the concept of sin and realize that this is a disease that needs to be treated, well, then religiousness or spirituality will become a risk factor. If the concept of sinfulness is pervasive in our churches, One thing that there was a meeting of all of the clergy of our diocese a few years ago, and the bishop was there, and all of the priests of all the parishes, and I gave them a brief education in substance use disorders. And one thing I said to them was that if someone is standing in the door right here, right now, pulls out a needle and a syringe and injects him, her, or herself with some heroin, is that person committing a sin? I asked everyone, and they were like confounded. And I said, absolutely not. That person is not committing a sin. It's not sinful that he or she are injecting themselves with heroin. It's part of their disease process. And what they are people that simply are sick and they need help. But it is not sinful. And it is not sinful that at my ministry, I provide syringes. At our ministry, we provide the cookers and we help them. And if they want to recover, then we will help them. If they do not want to recover, then we try to help them in a way so that they don't get sick or they don't acquire HIV or hepatitis C in the sharing of needles. And we give them needles. We're not committing a sin by giving them syringes. And that concept of sin has to be changed. So religiousness or spirituality can become a risk factor in the measure in which we include these diseases as sinful acts. If we can educate our clergy, if we can change our points of view, then it will not become a risk factor and that will dissipate. And we have to do that. I mean, it's just part of the maturity of the clergy of any church to realize that this is a disease that needs to be treated and that spirituality can be used as a very useful tool in the process of these people recovering. Right now, from my ministry in Cedra, we have 3 Eucharistic ministers that came to our ministry because of drug or alcohol abuse. Last Monday, one of our members entered the seminary with a goal of being a priest. So these people that I am mentioning, just to mention a few, have been totally transformed by their spirituality. They have realized that they had a disease that they can cure, and that once that is cured, they can progress in the relationship with God. So that's why I say, in our ministry anyway, we attend and we consider important all the aspects of the disease, but the cornerstone is the spirituality.
Thank you. So from what you're saying, spirituality and religion will either be a barrier or a facilitator, as depending, or that will be mediated by our understanding of alcohol use disorders as a disease. So those Definitely. Two are closely related. And so again, we come to the point of education of our faith-based leaders, clergy, etc. So that is definitely a takeaway from our conversation today. So, and now Alfredo, you can share.
Yeah, and for this one, I just want to share a story that comes straight from the Bible in relation to this particular concept of there's 2 sides, the punitive side and the grace. And so that story that comes to mind when you mention this is the thief on the cross, where there was some level of recognition from the thief that he needed help, and came to Christ on the cross. Christ recognized that, and through grace was able to say, "Today you will be in paradise with me." And that particular individual on the cross was broken. It was a thief, and didn't know theology, didn't practice any particular religion, uh, um, and had no knowledge of everything. He had one thing, which is belief, and Christ recognizing that provided grace. And I think if we can train our pastors and priests to recognize that particular scene on the cross and accepting everyone that comes to them in such a way to open that door for them so that they can be seen for who they really are, is a creation of God. And that is something that Christ was also against. So I'll give you the other side of that story, where Christ rebuked the Pharisees because they practiced certain things but ignored more important things. And those things that they ignored were the things that were related to grace and how to provide that to individuals so that they can come and be welcomed rather than in a punitive way be rejected by society. And so I would say that Christ lived it on both sides. One, rebuking the punitive, and promoting grace, and he did it on the cross.
Mhm. The tradition says that his name was Demas, the name of the thief. Demas.
Yeah.
Demas. Thank
And
you.
so that
And
is, I'm sorry, I wanted to add something, is that because we're a collectivist society, and reciprocity is so important to those who are, I would call them the faithful, right? In quotes, if I come to them where they're broken and coming through the door with an addiction, and the first thing that I share with them is my brokenness, how I need exactly what they need, and we are no different. We're both broken individuals. We're in need of a savior, and so that is the reciprocity and collectivist mentality that our leaders need, to be humble enough to say, "I am just like you. You are no different. And if you walk through this door, you walk through the door as my brother, nothing else." And if we recognize that, I think we would just be doing so well in the institutions that have been planted. And I think all of the communities would be blessed with that type of training, for people to be humble enough to understand that anyone walking through the door is just like them.
Agree. And as part of that collective value, collectivism recognizes that the wellness of one is the wellness of all. So, in the same sense, if one of us is unwell, then we all are. So that also promotes this sense of community and engaging and acceptance of everyone. So, thank you both. So we'll go to our next slide. And this is a more direct in terms of recommendations. What do you think is the role of a religious or spiritual leader in supporting recovery from alcohol use in Latino communities? And we'll start with Alfredo.
Let's see. Could you describe your role as a faith-based leader? I think if I had to describe, so our particular community has a program specific for addiction, but we do it as a family. As Dr. Santos mentioned, bringing in the community as a whole is, I think, my particular role. And I think that's where the question is, how would you practice this within your own community? And I think that the way that I would increase protective factors is to not necessarily normalize the addiction, but normalize the brokenness. That we are all in need of a physician, that we are all in need of some healing. And that alone, I think, engages the individual that is experiencing addiction as being accepted and not necessarily being somebody that is uniquely flawed. It's that we're all one family, we're all one community. We are what happens to you is what happens to me, and I think that that's the way I would take my role within as a faith leader in my congregation. I stand at the door almost every time that I go to church to make sure that that individual that's visiting is they feel incredibly welcome. And I think that's the way we need to go about any addiction solutions within our communities. And so it's that difference, I think, that we already mentioned, the difference between grace and punitive factors.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Alfredo. So the difference between sin and punitive factors, sin would become a barrier, and then grace would protect against alcohol use. That's what you're saying.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Santos.
One thing that we do in our faith-based community is we educate all the children that are in catechism, and we educate their parents, and we have sessions of education. And why do we educate? Because we want our community to not stigmatize those that have this disease. One thing that we have done on several occasions is that we announce that we are going to realize a detox in our community, in the, I guess we could call it a cellar, although it's open in one of our churches, in their church in town. And we have had up to 80 people with heroin addiction come for that 10-day process of what we used to be called detox, that now we call assisted withdrawal. And we have the community participate in that process during those 10 days, where we are there 10 days, 24 hours a day, and the community feeds these people. They provide security, they help them. We have volunteer nurses, social workers, psychologists, physicians, not many, usually it's just me, but we stay there for those 10 days, and we have assisted up to 80 people at one time to go through the process of heroin withdrawal, nowadays with fentanyl. And it's interesting because what we try to do is it involved hundreds of people from the community. And on the last night of the process, we have a vigil. And the last time we had a vigil at the detox, nearly 1,000 people came to pray for those that were going through the process. So in this way, involving the community in this process, the people that are going through the process are not innominate. Now they have names and they have last names. And now it's the little boy that was that or the kid that was at the corner asking for quarters or dollar bills to be able to buy drugs. No, no. Now this his name is Juan Perez, and his mom is called Joanna, and we know that he comes from a barrio in Sidra, and we know his name and we know his family, and in that way, people become sensitive, or and they lose their all this stigmatization towards the people that have this disease. And I think it's important to involve the community in this process. And we have meetings 3 times a week at our ministry, and anyone can come and anyone can learn, and anyone can come and be integrated into the process of recovery. And people are looking for a way to help. People want to help. People want to share the grace that has been bestowed upon them, upon everyone else. And I think there is a hunger for that. And all we have to do is create the spaces. And we can do that in our communities. And if we do that, then we can transform the psyche of our community in order for them to accept people with this disease and not only stigmatize them and call them junkies and all the other names that they can call them, so that they can call them by their name. And so they can learn that these are people that all they need is to be loved. And if they receive that, then in that love, in the grace that God gives them, they can recover. So there are things to be done, and we can do things in our community, and we can transform communities. It's not easy, but it is possible. And during these 25 years in the community that I live in, and where I preach and where I go to church and where I know basically everybody in town, because I was the pediatrician of 90% of the kids in this town. So those children that I saw in my office when I was a pediatrician are the ones that I treat now with drug addiction. The community knows them, and they've been sensitized to their presence. So it can be done. It can be done. We still have a long way to go, and a lot of people to convince, and a lot of people to educate. But it has to be a continuous process that we do in our communities.
Yeah. That is, if I can add one thing, that just came to mind in the U.S. Typically, the Alcoholic Anonymous is the program that is widely known and promoted. But I want to remind everyone that culturally speaking, Alcoholic Anonymous was created by two individuals, white males, that had a particular status within their own environment, and anonymity was a necessary thing for them to protect themselves from shame. And Alcoholic Anonymous is almost contrary to the Latino Hispanic model, where family reciprocity is important, and that requires to be known. So when we're in addiction, sometimes what the individual feels is, I am rejected by society and I am no one. But if a religious institution, a church, a pastor receives them and calls them by name and says, "Who is your family?" invites that family and creates a means to restore that relationship within the family, that's the model that works for us. Anonymity does not work because we want to be seen rather than be anonymous.
I think that's correct. And if you're not seen, then you're not brethren. if you're not seen.
Right,
Not bright.
right.
Yeah, that's so, it's very important. Actually, during our Holy Week, we have processions still in our communities, and our ministry participates fully. And sometimes the person that plays the role of Christ is someone from our ministry, and it's and so they get integrated within the religious community, and that feeling of being part of and not being rejected, then that is healing, totally healing, because
Sense of belonging.
it's important.
Thank you both. I think we addressed part of our last question, but we'll go ahead and see our next slide. We spoke about stigma, combating stigma, and understanding the disease of addiction, in particular alcohol use disorder. We spoke about the importance of a sense of belonging and community, being heard and being part of the community as work to be done, education for not only clergy and faith leaders, but also community members. Dr. Santos spoke about education from the catechesis, which is amazing. So would you provide any other recommendations for those who are working with Latinos who may be at risk of experiencing alcohol misuse from the religious perspective?
When you rent to providers, when you say providers, you mean physicians, social workers, addiction counselors?
All of those behavioral health providers, including all of those.
They have to be culturally sensitive to our community. Of course, where I work, everyone is Latino, so all the providers, so they know the culture because it's their own. But in the United States, they have to be culturally sensitive to understand the way we think, to see the world through our eyes, which is a bit different. And how the importance of family for us as a central part of our lives and of our to do every day. So I guess providers, the most important thing is that they have to be culturally sensitive to our communities.
The thing that I would recommend to providers. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Santos.
Yeah, something else I was going to mention is that the majority of our community is Christian. So that's something that has to be taken into consideration also, because of course Christianity changes your point of view, the way of seeing things, and a great deal of our Christianity, in a large number, are Roman Catholic. We have to realize that also. I mean, there are people in our communities from all denominations, but greatly Roman Catholic, which is a bit more conservative, and in many aspects, especially from the point of view of our clergy, and so we have to be sensitive to that reality, as far as when our providers provide services.
The one thing that I would recommend to providers is actually to become. It's an impossibility to be a cultural broker, meaning that you will never get to know the Latino community in in a particular cultural group the way you need to in order to become part of it, right? But you still need to know sufficient information about them in order to be able to work with them. And so, and the statistics that are shared with us is that we will never be able to develop enough Hispanic Latino providers to be able to meet the need. And so that means that the entire community of therapy and clinical work needs to be participating in this. It's not just for the Latino community. The one thing that I see is that in most circles that I'm part of, there's a confusion that's happening between the recognition of culture and the recognition of worldview. And so, and if I can paint a picture for you all, is if you can imagine an iceberg. The iceberg, the top of it, you can see it, and that's culture. And culture is everything that you hear, smell, taste, touch, and see. However, what we're talking about today is what's underneath that iceberg, which is much bigger, and it controls the majority of what we do, is worldview. And like Dr. Santos mentioned, the majority of Latinos have a worldview that is from a Christian root. And so we need to be able to recognize that in order to be able to provide what they need and make the appropriate adaptations. And I'm going to go a little bit farther in that there's some cultural dimensions that need to be understood. For example, how we view power dynamics. How Latinos view power dynamics is if you have a particular title and you're expected to have authority over a particular area, a particular role, a particular person, that power is respected. We talked about collectivism and individualism. The majority of Latinos are collectivists, but here in the United States, because of the things that we're experiencing and bumping in with other cultures, some of our Latino youth are more individualistic. And so we have to be able to recognize that. The third one would be how we view achievement versus collaboration. Are we driven to succeed in the same way, like the American dream, or are we collaborative? Are we more worried about how we succeed as a family unit versus an individual? How we look at uncertainty is another thing. Are we comfortable with not knowing certain things? Well, Latinos may be a little bit more comfortable in some sectors with uncertainty, short-term orientation versus long-term orientation, how we view the whole concept of time. And then the last one would be restraint versus indulgence. As you know, Latinos love to party. We like get-togethers. And so when we do that, we do it for reasons of kind of like rubbing shoulders and having that reciprocity happen again and again. And so those 6 concepts that I just shared, I think, are things that providers need to understand about the Latino community. And also the fact that there's over 500 languages spoken in Latin America and over 400, actually the reverse, over 400 languages spoken in over 500 cultures, that we're not homogenous. We are diverse within our own Latino-ness. And so what does that say? That tells us that anybody that walks through the door that's Latino, get to know them because they're going to be different from the other Latino. They might have some similarities, but at the end of the day, they're a person with a very unique set of values, and how they view their faith is one of those big factors because we have a huge population that is faith-based. And so anyway, that would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Phil. So yes, explore values, culture, and ideas about alcohol use and spirituality would be also be important for providers. I'm gonna ask if we could go to our next slide. We're gonna have hold a session for questions. We do have a few comments and questions, but I want to share with our participants the QR code and the link for our evaluation. So if we can go to that slide, we'll leave it up as we go through the Q&A. I'm not sure if Paola can do that, but we'll wait for her. So a few comments that we have. This is beautiful. Next slide. This is beautiful to be seen and loved by the family and not rejected. So powerful and healing, very different from other traditional anonymous models. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. We have another comment. I'm a forensic social worker and I do this work with incarcerated clients and also have those that have been released from prison or jail. As an addiction therapist in the Hispanic community, there are Hispanic-based AA meetings and they feel welcome. So that's another aspect of it that's important to consider if you're going to a 12-step program, that it's culturally sensitive, like we mentioned. Thank you. This was in regards to Dr. Hector Santos' work. Thank you so much for holding the space. God bless you all in the work that you're doing for God's kingdom in Jesus' name. Very educating. There's a question up here that I want to share. Here we go. Some of our clients refuse to go to 12-step programs because the word of God or higher power does not align with their values. It can be an excuse as well. I feel anything can be a higher power. Have you encountered this in your program? And could you just share something related, a response related to that?
Yeah, do you want me to respond to that? So one of the things is that because we're Latino, I think, well, I love my culture, first of all, because we're incredibly accepting and we're also, I think, I like to use the word civil. Civility is a big norm for us to be able to accept others, even though we may disagree. And I think that an individual that does not necessarily believe in God can actually go and be collaboratively engaged with the people versus maybe the engagement that they have with God. And so inviting them to participate in the group, not for the sake of their lack of belief, but for the sake of their collaborative nature and who they are in a community. And so I have so many friends that do not, believe what I believe, but I think that the reason they're my friends is because I'm having them experience my Latino-ness and that civility that is being lost everywhere else. I'm very welcoming just in my nature and just having them over for food. I'll pray and say, hey, we do this as a practice. Join us, but we understand that you may not believe. That's okay. And so having it be a normative practice is something that needs to be understood, that we are all very different, but we can come together and enjoy one another.
Thank you. Thank you. We have another question. We spoke, Dr. Santos, you spoke about this a bit. What would be a good recommendation for a faith-based service to open up their minds to understand this as an illness, not as a sin? How do you begin that process?
Education, education, education. The parishes have to become open to people who are trained in this discipline and understand the disease to be able to educate the people who attend their services. And that's the only way we're going to begin to eliminate all the stigma around this disease and all the ways that people refer to people who have substance use disorders. It's like in Puerto Rico, someone who has an alcohol use disorder, well, that's a borrachón, or another word that they use is un atómico, and that's all very disrespectful, etc. And but if we educate and people realize that it is a disease, then they are able to heal their stigma. And one thing that we do at our ministry is even the participants, they stigmatize themselves. Sometimes they refer to themselves as borrachón or atómico or tecato, and all those words in Spanish that are stigmatic for that disease, and we teach them to respect themselves inclusively. And of course, with the community, we have to do the same thing. Definitely.
Thank you. Education. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can I add that? I 100% agree. Education. But for those who are part of this, or are for you that are listening to this, education is definitely the way to go. But do not forget the context, right? Who is it that you're educating? And if you're educating the Latino community, you have to create that platform, that environment for them in order to accept the education that they're receiving. Because if you go into a Hispanic Latino community and you do a PowerPoint slide and it says, listen to this, right? And it's going to be between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, and then I got to go. Bye. I just want to make sure that you have the information. That to a Latino is not education. Education still has the remnants of what we've been talking about, which is relationship. Having them come and having something to drink for them, some food that's present, for them to be able to talk afterwards and have relationship with you. All those things that we've been talking about, Dr. Santos already mentioned in relation to what leaders need to be doing, is something that needs to be experienced in the education aspect of what we do. So I agree, education within context.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for accepting our invitation to be a panelist today. We appreciate this conversation, with this much needed conversation. To our participants, again, please take some time to complete the evaluations. We have the QR code and the links. We have them in English and in Spanish for your convenience. Also, to let you know, we will be starting our second cycle for the Leadership Academy. If you would like more information on this initiative, we are developing young providers who are interested in developing leadership skills to participate. You can be on the lookout at our website at www.hispaniclatinobehavioralhealth.org for more information. We have applications available for those of you who are interested. Again, we would like to thank our panelists for participating today, and we look forward to having you in future events. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless you all.